I always thought I knew everything about my family. I believed my daughter was my miracle, the child I waited my whole life to have. But that belief was destroyed the moment I opened her diary and read a single line that made my hands go cold. It said, "Dad isn't my real father." At first, I laughed nervously, thinking it must be something she wrote years ago. Maybe she was angry. Maybe it was teenage rebellion. But when I turned the page, I saw more. Mom doesn't know. My chest tightened. My heart started racing. What did she mean by that? Was she accusing me of something? Or had someone told her a lie about her father? My husband Thomas and I had been married for over 40 years. We built everything together. Our home, our family, our peace. We never had secrets. Or at least, I thought we didn't. Our daughter Emily was everything to us. She was kind, gentle, hardworking. She called every Sunday and visited every other month. Sure, she'd been distant lately, but I blamed it on her busy life. Never in my worst nightmares did I imagine she was hiding something that could tear our family apart. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling while Thomas slept beside me, breathing slow and steady. I wanted to wake him, show him the note, demand an explanation. But how could I? What if he had no idea? What if this was something Emily misunderstood? Or worse, what if there was truth behind it? The next morning, I held the diary in my hands for hours before finally calling Emily. She sounded cheerful at first, but when I asked if everything was okay between her and her father, her voice changed. It went quiet. "Mom, please don't ask me that," she said softly. "It'll only hurt you." Her answer crushed me. I didn't even know what it meant, but I could hear the fear in her voice. Something was terribly wrong, and she was protecting me from it. That made it worse. I ended the call, pretending everything was fine, but my mind wouldn't stop spinning. I walked through the house, looking at the framed photos on our walls. Emily's first birthday, her graduation, our family Christmases. I had been there for every moment of her life, every scrape, every hug, every tear. So how could anything about her be a lie? I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the diary in front of me. The page was still open, the ink slightly smudged where my tears had fallen. I whispered out loud, "If Thomas isn't her father, then who is?" I didn't know then that the answer I was about to uncover would change not just how I saw my husband, but how I saw myself. If you're watching this, make sure to subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because what I discovered next was a truth no mother should ever have to face. Before everything fell apart, I believed my life was ordinary, peaceful even. My name is Margaret Pierce, but everyone calls me Maggie. I'm 63, a retired teacher, and I've lived in the same quiet suburban home for over 30 years. My husband Thomas is 65, a kind man with gentle eyes and a dry sense of humor. We've shared a life filled with routines, morning coffee together, gardening on weekends, and movie nights every Friday. We were never rich, but we were happy. And for most of my life, our daughter Emily was the center of that happiness. She was the baby I thought I could never have. After years of failed treatments and heartbreak, she came into our lives like a miracle. I used to tell her she was our answered prayer. She'd laugh and say, "Then I guess I owe God a thank you card." Even as she grew older and moved to another city, we stayed close. She'd call to tell me about her new job, her friends, or the recipes she was trying. Sometimes she'd visit for a weekend, bringing her smile and energy that made the house feel alive again. But over the last year, something changed. Her calls became less frequent. When she visited, she seemed distracted, watching her phone more than she watched me. I told myself it was just adulthood, that all children drift a little when they grow older. But deep down, I missed her in a way that felt heavier than usual. Then came that weekend. Emily had visited for my birthday. She stayed overnight, and I remember hugging her before bed, telling her how proud I was of her. The next morning, after she left, I started cleaning the kitchen. That's when I found her diary, sitting open near her coffee cup. The words, "Dad isn't my real father," were written in her handwriting, small, careful, and certain. I could hardly breathe. Every thought raced through my head. Did she find something online? Was she angry at Thomas? Or was there something she knew that I didn't? I told myself I shouldn't snoop, but the fear was too strong. I flipped a few more pages, but they were blank. It was like she had written that one note and left it behind on purpose, as if she wanted me to find it. I didn't know who to talk to. Thomas had gone to run errands, and I couldn't bring myself to call Emily again. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table for hours, rereading the same line until it started to blur. My heart ached, not just with fear, but with guilt. What if I had missed something all these years? What if my perfect little family had cracks I never saw? When Thomas came home, he smiled as always, carrying a bouquet of flowers and saying, "For my beautiful wife." I smiled back, but it felt forced. My heart screamed for answers, but my lips stayed silent. That night, I stared at him across the dinner table, wondering how much he knew. Every word he said sounded normal, every laugh honest. Yet I couldn't help but wonder, was it all built on a lie? And that's when a thought crept into my mind, one I couldn't shake. If I couldn't trust anyone's words, maybe I could trust science. Maybe the truth was something I could prove. I decided then that I would find out the truth myself, quietly, carefully, no matter the cost. From the moment I decided to find the truth, I felt a quiet war start inside me. Every instinct as a mother told me not to question my family, not to dig up old ghosts. But something stronger pushed me forward, the need to know. I couldn't live with a question that kept whispering in my mind every time I looked at my daughter's photo. So, one morning, after Thomas left, I sat down at the computer and ordered a DNA testing kit. My hands were shaking so badly I mistyped my name twice. I told myself it was just to ease my mind, that once the results came back, everything would go back to normal. But deep down, I think I already knew it wouldn't. I waited until Emily came to visit again 2 weeks later. She was distant as usual, polite, but distracted. Over breakfast, I smiled and asked her about work, about her friends, about her life, but she gave short answers, her eyes fixed on her phone. When she left, I went upstairs to change her bed sheets and noticed her hairbrush sitting on the dresser. A few strands of hair clung to the bristles. My heart pounded. I stood there for a long time staring at it, feeling both guilty and terrified. Then, slowly, I took a plastic bag and sealed the brush inside. That night, when Thomas went to sleep, I quietly collected a toothbrush from his side of the sink and a hair sample from my own brush. I packed everything carefully and sent the samples to the lab. The instructions said results would take about 3 weeks. It felt like the longest 3 weeks of my life. Every day, I went about my routines, cooking, watering plants, reading, but my thoughts always drifted back to that package traveling through the mail. Sometimes I prayed it would get lost. Other times I prayed it would come faster. I watched Thomas closely during those days, studying every expression, every small gesture. Was he hiding something? Did he know? One evening, he sat beside me on the couch, took my hand, and said, "You've been quiet lately, Maggie. Everything all right?" I smiled weakly and said I was fine. But inside, I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask him if there was ever a time, long ago, when he made a mistake. But fear stopped me. I wasn't ready for that answer yet. Finally, the email arrived. I remember the moment vividly. The afternoon sunlight spilling through the kitchen window, the soft hum of the refrigerator, and my trembling hand clicking open. My heart pounded in my chest so hard I thought I might faint. The results appeared in black letters that burned into my eyes. No paternal match detected between Thomas Pierce and Emily Pierce. For a moment, I couldn't. I reread the line again and again, hoping it would change. It didn't. The air around me felt heavier. My hands went cold. My husband, the man I had loved faithfully for 40 years, wasn't my daughter's father. I sat there in silence for hours, the computer screen still glowing. My mind tried to make sense of it. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe the samples got mixed up. Maybe I'd ruined everything with my paranoia. I couldn't bring myself to tell Thomas. Not yet. I needed to be sure. I called the testing company the next morning, pretending to be calm. The woman on the phone explained that I could run a second test, a maternal comparison, to confirm accuracy. She said it almost casually, like it was nothing, but those words lit a strange spark in me. If Thomas wasn't her father, at least I would know she was mine. That thought gave me strength. I ordered the second test immediately. Another 2 weeks of waiting. Those days were heavier than before. Every morning, I'd look at the mail and feel my stomach twist. I tried to distract myself. Cooking Thomas's favorite meals, visiting the neighbors, organizing old photo albums, but everything reminded me of Emily. Her first steps, her first day of school, the way she used to cling to me when she was scared. What if all of that was built on a lie? When the second email arrived, my heart felt like it stopped. My hands shook as I opened it. I read the first line once, then again, my mind refusing to process the words. No genetic relationship detected between Subject A, Margaret Pierce, and Subject B, Emily Pierce. It was as if the floor beneath me gave way. I fell into the chair, gasping. Tears spilled down my cheeks uncontrollably. I felt like someone had ripped my entire life apart in one sentence. The child I had raised, loved, and protected wasn't biologically mine. I looked around the kitchen at the photographs covering the wall, her baby picture, her graduation, her wedding. Every image felt like a memory stolen from someone else's story. My hands trembled as I whispered, "That's not possible." I carried her. I held her in my arm. I stayed in that chair until the sun went down, trying to breathe, trying to understand. My head was pounding, my heart aching. I wanted to call Emily, to demand answers, but I knew she didn't even know this truth herself, and I couldn't tell Thomas. Not yet. That night, I didn't sleep. I just lay there, staring into the dark, clutching the results in my hand. My life had become something I no longer recognized. I wasn't the woman I thought I was. I wasn't even the mother I thought I was. As the morning light crept through the curtains, I made a decision. I needed to find out what had happened. If Emily wasn't ours, then whose child was she? Somewhere, someone knew the truth, and I was going to find them, even if it meant uncovering the most painful secret of my life. The morning after I read the DNA results, I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the folded papers in my lap. My hands trembled, but my mind was clear. I needed answers. I couldn't live in the fog of questions anymore. For 40 years, I believed my family was whole. I had to know where that belief had gone wrong. I decided I would confront Thomas, no matter how painful it would be. He was sitting at the kitchen table, reading the newspaper like any other morning. The smell of his coffee filled the room, familiar and comforting, but that comfort was gone now. I sat across from him, the papers clutched tightly in my hand. "Thomas," I said quietly, "I need to talk to you about something serious." He looked up, his brow furrowing when he saw the tears in my eyes. "What is it, Maggie?" I slid the results toward him. "I did a DNA test," I said. His face froze as he slowly reached for the papers. It was about Emily. He scanned the page, confusion twisting into shock. "You did what?" His voice was calm at first, but there was an edge of fear beneath it. "I had to know, Thomas," I said, my voice breaking. "Emily wrote in her diary that you weren't her real father." I needed to know the truth. He looked down again, his eyes darting across the page. His hands began to shake. "Maggie," he whispered, "I swear to you, I have never, not once, been unfaithful." His words hit me hard. I wanted to believe him. I had loved this man my entire life, but the paper in front of us said otherwise. "Then explain this," I said softly, pushing the page closer. "If you're not her father, and I'm not her mother, then whose child is she?" He stared at me like he couldn't breathe. For a long time, he didn't say anything. Then finally, he spoke. "There's something you don't know about the night Emily was born." My heart began to race. "What do you mean?" He leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant, his voice barely above a whisper. "You nearly died that night, Maggie. You lost so much blood. The doctors rushed you into surgery and I wasn't allowed in the room. They told me to wait outside. It felt like hours. When they finally brought Emily to me, I was just relieved you were alive. I didn't question anything. I didn't notice anything strange." I felt my stomach twist. "Are you saying the hospital gave us the wrong baby?" "I don't know," he said helplessly. "But if what those results say is true, then maybe that's what happened." The idea seemed impossible, almost ridiculous, but it was the only thing that made any sense. My mind flashed back to that night, the bright lights of the hospital, the pain, the panic, the sound of nurses shouting orders. I remembered waking up groggy and weak, and Thomas holding a tiny baby, smiling through tears. I had barely even seen her before they placed her in my arms. Could there have been a mistake? I felt faint. Thomas, why didn't anyone tell us? He shook his head. Maybe they didn't know, or maybe they did, and just wanted to forget it ever happened. That thought made my skin crawl. How could someone mix up two babies, two lives, and never make it right? I stood up, pacing the room. We have to find out. We can't just sit here pretending everything's fine. Thomas hesitated. Maggie, it's been over 30 years. Hospitals close, records get lost. What if we can't find anything? Then we try anyway, I said firmly. Because if Emily isn't our daughter, then someone else out there is. And that woman deserves to know just as much as we do. He nodded slowly, and for the first time since that awful discovery, I saw determination in his eyes too. We spent the next week gathering every document we had. Emily's birth certificate, the hospital's name, my old medical files, even an old envelope of photographs from that day. We contacted the hospital, now under a new name, and asked for any remaining birth records from the year Emily was born. They were hesitant at first, but after hours of calls and explaining, they agreed to pull the archived files. A week later, we drove there together. The building looked different, newer, brighter, but as soon as I walked through the doors, the smell of antiseptic and the echo of footsteps brought back everything I had tried to forget. We were led to a small office where an older nurse listened patiently as we told our story. She looked troubled. That was a long time ago, she said carefully, but there were incidents. 2 babies born close together, both with the last initial P. There was confusion in the records. We thought it had been corrected. I gripped the edge of the desk. You thought? She sighed. It was chaotic that night. A power outage, staff changes, new charts being written by hand. We did everything to fix it, but maybe something went wrong. Thomas and I exchanged a look that said everything. The fear, the heartbreak, the dawning truth. The nurse hesitated, then continued. There was another family, the Millers. They had a baby girl born within minutes of yours. I can't promise anything, but if you want, I can give you their contact information. My heart pounded. Yes, please. We left the hospital in silence, the paper with the Miller's name trembling in my hand. My emotions were tangled. Fear, hope, guilt, disbelief. If this was true, if Emily wasn't ours, then maybe somewhere out there was the daughter I really gave birth to. When we got home, Thomas took my hand. Whatever happens, Maggie, we'll face it together. I nodded, though my voice barely came out. Together, I whispered. But inside, I knew things would never be the same. The week after we got the Miller's contact information was one of the longest of my life. Every morning, I would wake up and stare at that folded piece of paper on my nightstand, terrified to open it, and equally terrified not to. My heart ached with guilt. Guilt for Emily, guilt for Thomas, guilt for the years of love I had given without knowing the truth. But beneath that guilt was something else, a quiet, desperate hope. If the hospital really had made a mistake, then maybe somewhere out there was my biological daughter, the baby I brought into this world, but never had the chance to raise. Finally, one morning, I picked up the phone and called the number the nurse had given us. My hands trembled so badly I almost dropped it. A woman answered, her voice calm but cautious. "This is Linda Miller," she said. I swallowed hard. "Mrs. Miller," I began softly. "This may sound strange, but I believe there may have been a mistake at St. Joseph's Hospital the night your daughter was born." There was silence for a long moment. Then she said, her voice trembling, "Who is this?" "My name is Margaret Pierce," I said, "and I had a daughter that same night, in the same ward. I believe the hospital may have given us the wrong babies." Her gasp was so sharp I felt it in my bones. "We always wondered," she whispered. "Our daughter never looked like us. She always said she felt different. We thought it was just her imagination." We spoke for nearly an hour. By the end of that call, we agreed to meet in person, not for answers, but for truth. 2 days later, Thomas and I drove 2 hours to a small town on the edge of the state. The Millers lived in a modest white house with a garden full of roses. My hands were shaking as we pulled into their driveway. A tall woman in her 30s stepped onto the porch, her eyes fixed on us. The moment I saw her, my breath caught. She had my eyes, the same pale green color I'd seen in the mirror my whole life. Her name was Anna Miller. We stood there for a long moment, just staring at each other. Then she stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're Mrs. Pierce?" I nodded. "Please, call me Maggie." Her mother came outside and hugged me like she'd known me forever. "I don't know what happened back then," she said tearfully, "but if you're here, it means we're finally going to get answers." Inside their home, we sat around the dining table. Anna offered us tea, her hands trembling as she poured. I couldn't stop staring at her. The curve of her smile, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the nervous way she stirred her cup, even when she wasn't adding sugar. Every movement was familiar. It was like watching a piece of myself I didn't know I'd lost. Thomas handed Anna the DNA kit we had brought. "If you're willing," he said gently, "we can find out for sure." She nodded. "I've wondered about this for years," she said quietly. "Maybe now I'll finally know who I really am." We sent the samples to the lab together. The waiting felt unbearable. I couldn't eat or sleep. My mind played out both possibilities over and over. What if it wasn't her, and I was clinging to false hope? Or worse, what if it was true, and I'd have to face Emily with a truth that would tear her apart? When the results arrived, the words blurred through my tears. Confirmed biological match between Margaret Pierce and Anna Miller. I sat there in silence, my heart pounding in my chest. Anna was my daughter, my flesh and blood, my baby. Thomas reached over and put his arm around me. "You found her," he whispered. When we told Anna, she covered her face with her hands and began to cry. "All my life I felt like something was missing," she said. "Now I know what it was." We embraced, and for a moment, it felt like the world had stopped spinning. It was a strange kind of joy, not loud or overwhelming, but deep and quiet, filled with both relief and grief. I had found my daughter, but in doing so, I knew I might lose the one I had raised. Later that night, I called Emily. My heart raced as I told her I needed to see her in person. When she arrived, I could tell she sensed something was wrong. She sat across from me, her eyes wary. "Emily," I began softly, "I found something. Something about the night you were born." She frowned. "What do you mean?" I showed her the hospital records, the DNA results, the letter from the nurse. As she read, her hands started to tremble. "You're saying I'm not your daughter?" My eyes filled with tears. "You'll always be my daughter, no matter what the papers say. You're the one I raised, the one I loved every day of my life." She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Then who am I, Mom? Who am I?" I moved closer and took her hands in mine. "You're Emily. You're strong, kind, brave. Everything a mother could hope for. That's who you are, and nothing will ever change that." For a long time, she just cried in my arms. Thomas stood quietly by the doorway, his eyes wet. The next few weeks were difficult. There was confusion, anger, guilt, and even distance. But slowly, something remarkable happened. Emily agreed to meet Anna, and when they did, something in the room shifted. Two women who should have been strangers looked at each other and somehow understood. They hugged, and I realized then that the world didn't have to be broken by what we'd found. It could be healed by it. As I watched them talk, laugh, and share stories of the lives they'd lived, I realized something simple yet powerful. Blood may connect us by birth, but love connects us for life. A year has passed since the truth came out, but sometimes it still feels like I'm living someone else's life. There are moments when I look at Emily and feel a flicker of fear, a reminder that science said she isn't mine. But then she laughs or calls me Mom with that same warmth she always has, and every doubt melts away. Because no test in the world can erase a lifetime of love. After the truth surfaced, the weeks that followed were hard for everyone. Emily pulled away at first. She said she needed space to process everything, and I understood. She had grown up believing one story about her life, and suddenly it was ripped apart. She told me once, in a quiet, trembling voice, "Mom, I feel like I don't know who I am anymore." That broke me. But I told her the truth as I saw it, that identity isn't built by DNA, but by the moments that make us who we are. The late night talks, the scraped knees, the birthdays, the hugs, those were real. Nothing could rewrite those years. Thomas handled it differently. He was heartbroken, but strong. There were nights I'd find him sitting alone in the living room, staring at old photo albums, tracing his fingers over baby pictures of Emily. One night, I sat beside him, and he said, "I don't care what any paper says. That's my little girl." I nodded, tears falling freely, because I felt the same. We had built our family through love, not chance, and no revelation could undo that. But we couldn't just close the door on the truth. We had to face what it meant. I began meeting with Anna regularly, my biological daughter. At first, it was awkward. We were strangers trying to find something we never had time to build. But every conversation drew us closer. I learned that she loved to read like I did, that she hummed while she cooked just like me, and that she had my stubborn streak, something Thomas found amusing whenever she came by. Anna's parents, the Millers, were kind, good people. They loved her just as we loved Emily. When I met them again, there was no anger between us, just shared sadness for the years that had been stolen from all of us. Linda Miller told me through tears, "We both loved the wrong child, but maybe it wasn't wrong after all. Maybe we were meant to." And in a strange way, I understood exactly what she meant. Eventually, Emily agreed to meet Anna, too. That day was one of the most emotional of my life. The two young women looked at each other for a long moment, both hesitant, both unsure. Then Emily smiled nervously and said, "So, I guess we're kind of sisters, huh?" Anna laughed through her tears. "I guess so." They sat down and talked for hours. It was like they'd known each other all along, as if some invisible thread had always connected them despite the mix-up. Watching them together was overwhelming. I saw Emily's kindness soften Anna's edges, and Anna's warmth draw Emily out of her shell again. They began visiting each other, sending messages, sharing memories. Slowly, the pain began to fade, replaced by something unexpected, healing. One evening, we all gathered at my house, Thomas, Emily, Anna, and the Millers. It felt strange at first, like two worlds colliding, but then something beautiful happened. We laughed, we told stories, we cried, and for the first time, I didn't feel broken anymore. I felt complete, not in the way I once was, but in a new, fragile, honest way. That night, after everyone left, I stood in the garden under the soft glow of the porch light. The air was cool, the roses were blooming again, and I realized how much life had changed, and how much I had changed with it. There was a time when I thought truth would destroy me, but now I understood that truth doesn't break families. It rebuilds them, piece by piece, if there's love enough to hold the cracks together. Emily came outside and joined me. She slipped her arm through mine and leaned her head on my shoulder. "Mom," she said softly, "thank you for not giving up on me." I smiled, brushing her hair gently away from her face. "I never could. You're my daughter. You'll always be my daughter." She squeezed my hand and whispered, "And you'll always be my mom." In that moment, I realized something I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. Love doesn't need proof. It doesn't need matching DNA or shared bloodlines. It lives in the way we choose to care, forgive, and stay when life gives us every reason to walk away. I lost a daughter once, but in the end, I gained two. And somehow, that feels like life's way of giving back what was unfairly taken. These days, I spend my mornings tending to my garden, my afternoons visiting Anna, and my evenings on video calls with Emily. Sometimes the two of them talk to each other more than they talk to me, and that makes me smile. Our story isn't perfect, but it's real, and that's enough. I often think back to that day I found the note in Emily's diary, the day everything started to unravel. I used to wish it had never happened, but now I see it differently. That note didn't end my family. It helped me find the truth, the daughter I lost, and the strength to love without boundaries. If you're still watching, I want you to remember this. Families aren't defined by blood, but by the love that endures when everything else falls apart. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because stories like this remind us all that even in the darkest moments, love always finds a way home.